Merry Christmas.
The McCallister home was buzzing with a rare kind of chaos that morning, the air thick with the scent of winter, and the sounds of laughter mixed with the occasional shout of frustration. Christmas was just around the corner, and the large, lively family was preparing for a vacation that had been anticipated for months, a Christmas getaway to Paris, France. Unlike the fateful morning depicted in the original tale, this time, everyone was accounted for, especially 8-year-old Kevin, who was more excited than anyone about the trip. Kevin, amidst the bustle, felt a surge of pride as he double-checked his own packing, making sure he had everything he needed, his backpack filled with comics, snacks, and a small digital camera he'd received as an early Christmas gift from his uncle. As he zipped up his suitcase, his mother Kate appeared at the door of his room, her expression a mixture of stress and affection. "Kevin, you're all set?" she asked, her voice rising slightly over the noise echoing from downstairs. "Yep, Mom, all ready," Kevin replied, his eyes bright with anticipation. He couldn't wait to see the Eiffel Tower, the museums, and especially the snow-covered streets of Paris that he had seen in one of his bedtime storybooks. Downstairs, the rest of the McCallisters were in various stages of readiness, dragging suitcases down, checking passports, and making sure the windows were locked and electronics unplugged. Peter McCallister, Kevin's father, was on the phone speaking in hushed, serious tones, a side of him Kevin rarely saw, and one he didn't quite understand. It added a layer of mystery to his father, one that intrigued and slightly worried him. As the family piled into 2 taxis destined for the airport, the house stood silent and empty, or so it seemed. Across the street, hidden by the sheer curtain of falling snow, 2 figures watched the procession of luggage and laughter with keen interest. Marv and Harry, known in the local circles as the Wet Bandits, noted the family's departure with glee. "This is it, Harry. The big one. The McCallister house," Marv whispered, a grin spreading across his unshaven face. Harry, the brains of the duo, nodded, pulling the collar of his jacket tighter against the cold. "Yeah, and no kid to screw things up this time. Let's give it till tonight, then we make our move." As night fell and the McCallisters made their way through the bustling airport, checked in, and finally boarded their flight, a sense of accomplishment settled over them. The flight was smooth, filled with in-flight movies and mediocre airplane food, which Kevin found strangely exciting. He pressed his face against the window, watching the lights of Chicago fade into the distance, unaware of the dark turn their family trip was about to take. Back in the quiet of the McCallister neighborhood, snow continued to blanket the empty streets. The only movement came from Old Man Marley's house, where the elderly man watched from his window, a troubled look on his face, as he noticed the shadows moving towards the McCallister home. Known in the neighborhood as somewhat of a recluse, Marley was also keenly observant, and something about the evening's quiet didn't sit right with him. Grabbing his heavy shovel, the one he used to clear the sidewalk, Marley decided to take a closer look. As he approached the McCallister home, he saw the back door being forced open. Without a second thought, he rushed towards the intruders, his intention to scare them off clear. But tonight, the stakes were higher than he knew. Marv, startled by Marley's sudden appearance, reacted out of panic more than malice. The gun, meant to be a last resort, was in his hand before he even realized it. A loud bang echoed through the crisp winter air, and Marley fell, the snow around him stained a deep, dark red. The scene cut back to the blissfully unaware McCallisters, laughing and chatting as their plane cut through the clouds, flying towards the lights of Paris, leaving behind a neighborhood and a life they wouldn't recognize when they returned. The twinkling lights of Paris greeted the McCallisters as they disembarked from the plane, their breaths visible in the chilly December air. The city was a festive spectacle, with streets lined with decorations and the scent of roasted chestnuts wafting through the air. The McCallisters, though weary from their journey, were captivated by the charm of the city, their earlier anxieties melting away with each step on the cobblestone streets. Their hotel was a grand old building in the heart of Paris, overlooking a small picturesque square bustling with holiday shoppers and street musicians. After checking in, they quickly settled into their rooms, eager to explore the city. Kevin, his eyes wide with wonder, pressed his face against the cold glass of their hotel room window, gazing out at the Eiffel Tower sparkling in the distance. Back in Chicago, the news of the night's grim events had not yet reached the police. The snow continued to fall, silently covering the tracks of Marv and Harry, as well as the grim scene outside the McCallister home. Old Man Marley's body lay undiscovered, a haunting oversight on a night that was supposed to be filled with joy and anticipation. The McCallisters spent their first day in Paris, visiting landmarks, laughing and taking pictures, blissfully unaware of the tragedy unfolding back home. As night fell, they gathered in a cozy bistro, savoring the local cuisine and discussing their plans for Christmas Eve. Kevin listened to his parents and siblings, feeling a sense of belonging and happiness that he thought could never be overshadowed. Meanwhile, Peter McCallister received a phone call that seemed to change the atmosphere. He stepped away from the table, his expression turning stern as he listened intently. After a few minutes, he returned, his demeanor strained but trying to mask his concern from the family. "Everything okay, Dad?" Kevin asked, noticing the change. Peter forced a smile. "Everything's fine, kiddo. Just some business stuff I need to handle. Don't worry about it." But Kevin couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, as he lay in bed, the city's distant noises lulled him into a restless sleep, filled with shadows and whispers that didn't belong in the world of a child. On Christmas Eve, as the McCallisters prepared to attend a midnight mass at Notre Dame Cathedral, the true extent of Peter's involvement in darker dealings began to surface. As they left the hotel, a group of stern-looking men watched from across the street. They were not tourists admiring the festive lights. Their eyes were cold, their intentions darker than the night sky. The service was beautiful, with choirs singing carols and candles flickering softly in the cathedral's ancient hall. But as the family walked back to their hotel, the festive air was shattered by the screech of tires. A black van pulled up alongside them, and masked men wielding guns jumped out, shouting in harsh, aggressive tones. Chaos erupted on the street. Peter yelled for his family to run as he tried to shield them from the attackers. Gunshots rang out, echoing off the stone buildings with terrifying clarity. Kevin, gripped by panic, found himself separated from his family, dodging down an alley as he heard the cries of his mother and siblings cut through the night air. Hiding behind a dumpster, Kevin's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to process the nightmare unfolding around him. Tears streamed down his face, not just from fear, but from the realization that his father's secrets had invited danger into their lives. As the sounds of the confrontation died down, Kevin, trembling, made his way back to the hotel. The lobby was in disarray, with police and paramedics rushing about. A kindly hotel clerk, seeing the distraught boy, quickly ushered him to a quiet corner. "Your family. They have been taken to the hospital," the clerk said gently, trying to shield Kevin from the harsher truth. Alone and scared, Kevin was left to navigate the darkest night of his life, surrounded by the beauty of Paris, now overshadowed by the terror that had struck his family. The grandeur of Paris had turned into a chilling backdrop for Kevin, whose world had been shattered in mere moments. Alone in the hotel, he wandered through the labyrinth of opulent hallways, each step echoing the haunting realization of his isolation. The police, while sympathetic, had their hands tied with bureaucracy and whispers of corruption. They advised him to stay put until more could be learned about the attack on his family. Kevin, however, couldn't sit still. Driven by a mix of fear and the need to do something, anything, he decided to take action. Sneaking out of the hotel with only a backpack, he made his way to the airport, avoiding the main streets and using the skills he'd seen in movies to blend into the crowds. His heart was a drumbeat of desperation, propelling him forward, back to the place he knew best, his home in Chicago. As he boarded the plane, the faces around him blurred into a sea of strangers, none aware of the boy's heavy heart. The flight felt like an eternity, each minute stretching out with the weight of his grim reality. When he finally landed in Chicago, the city was blanketed in snow, the white covering attempting to muffle the harshness of his return. Kevin navigated the familiar streets, now turned foreign with his loss, his small frame almost disappearing in the winter coat that was slightly too big for him. Arriving home, Kevin found it surrounded by police tape and flashing lights. A crime scene that had claimed Old Man Marley and now threatened to engulf his entire family. With nowhere else to go, he sought refuge in an abandoned apartment building he and his friends had always been curious about but never dared to explore. Inside, the building was cold and echoing with the emptiness of forgotten things. Kevin, using materials scavenged from the debris, began to set traps. Not the playful snares he had once imagined to protect against imagined monsters, but real, dangerous traps, designed with the desperate ingenuity of someone fighting for survival. He rigged paint buckets to swing at intruders, set up boards with nails protruding dangerously out, and prepared a makeshift blowtorch. Each trap was a testament to his resolve, a boy sculpted by tragedy into a figure of vengeance and sorrow. Christmas Eve fell over the city, a silent night disrupted only by the whispers of wind against the broken windows of the building. Kevin, crouched behind a wall, his eyes trained on the entrance, waited. The killers, he knew, would come. They would come to finish what they started, driven by the same shadows that had followed his father. And they did come. The door creaked open, revealing figures cloaked in darkness, their steps cautious but determined. As they moved through the building, Kevin's traps sprung to life. A paint bucket swung, hitting one squarely on the head with a thud that echoed through the halls. Another stepped on a nail board, his cry of pain muffled by the mask he wore. But these men were not easily deterred. They continued, driven by malice, or perhaps by the promise of payment from a rival still lurking in the shadows of the underworld. They closed in on Kevin's hiding spot, their guns drawn. Just as the situation reached its peak, sirens pierced the night. The police, alerted by an anonymous tip from a concerned neighbor who had seen Kevin's plight, stormed the building. They were the good ones, the ones not bought by corruption, who believed in protecting the innocent. The officers swept through the building, apprehending the intruders. Kevin, emerging from his hiding spot, felt a rush of relief mingled with a profound sorrow. He was safe for now, but the cost was immeasurable. In the aftermath, as he was escorted out of the building, Kevin looked back at the place that had been his last stand. The police promised care and protection, but as he was driven away, his gaze lingered on the McCallister home one last time. It stood empty and silent, a shell of the warmth and love it once held. Kevin returned to the hotel, the scene of his last memories with his family. now under the care of authorities. As he entered the room where he had laughed and played just days ago, he collapsed, the weight of his survival pressing down on him. On Christmas morning, the world awoke to celebrations, but for Kevin, it was a day of mourning. He sat alone in the hotel room, surrounded by the ghosts of Christmas past, the echoes of his family's laughter, a stark contrast to the quiet sobs that filled the room as he grieved for everything lost. The days following the tragic Christmas were a blur for Kevin. The city of Chicago, draped in its wintry blanket, moved on with its daily rhythm, unaware of the small boy who carried a heavy burden in his heart. Kevin remained in the hotel under the care of social services, surrounded by well-meaning adults who spoke in hushed tones and offered comfort that felt distant and hollow. As the new year approached, Kevin decided he needed to see his home one last time. Accompanied by a kind social worker, he returned to the McCallister house. The police tape had been removed, and the snow had begun to melt, revealing patches of the life that once was. Stepping inside, Kevin wandered through the rooms, each corner holding a memory, each echo a reminder of laughter and love that now felt like echoes from another lifetime. He paused in the living room, where the Christmas tree still stood, its lights dimmed, and the presents his family had excitedly packed for the trip now unopened, gathering dust. Approaching the tree, Kevin knelt and picked up a small box, the tag from his mother still attached, her handwriting bright and cheerful. To Kevin, with all our love. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he clutched the gift, the weight of his solitude pressing down on him. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered lawn. Kevin walked out to the backyard, his steps slow, almost reluctant. He looked around at the familiar setting where he had played and imagined countless adventures. Now, it felt like a distant dream. As he stood there, a gentle snow began to fall, the flakes soft and silent. Kevin tilted his face up, letting the snowflakes touch his skin, each one a cold kiss of reality. The world around him was moving on, but for him, time seemed to stand still, caught between the past full of warmth and a future uncertain and gray. The social worker called to him gently, telling him it was time to go. Kevin took one last look at his home, the place that had nurtured his happiest days. With a heavy heart, he turned away, the soft crunch of his boots in the snow, the only sound in the quiet of the approaching night. As they drove away, Kevin looked back through the rear window, the house receding into the distance, becoming just another part of the landscape. Inside him, the spark of resilience that had helped him survive began to flicker with new purpose. Though the journey ahead was uncertain, Kevin knew he carried the strength of his family's love with him, embedded in his heart like the hidden warmth of a winter ember. And in that moment, though the silence was profound, the echoes of his family's love whispered through the chill, a quiet reminder that even in the deepest sorrow, there is a promise of renewal and hope.